Again, fundamental to the role of leadership is the question of influence. Leaders within organisations influence. They influence the people within their organisation through mentoring, through providing opportunity, through providing direction, through role modelling. They also provide leadership in the broader society. When leading companies, when major corporations pick up a cause, that has broader implications, broader ramifications within the society. Other members of the society are looking, what are corporations doing, what are the strategies they're putting in place, what's the role modelling that they're putting in place, how can we pick up on that, how can we follow their lead. So again, it's important as leaders, as you're all obviously aware, the question of influence and how that influence plays out is a critical one. So in terms of thinking about organisational change, the connection between business and society, the question of leadership is a critical one. It's at the centre of the analysis, the centre of our discussion. How do we then make the move from leadership as a general concept through to the idea of responsible leadership? Again, we've already heard some definition, some discussion of the idea of responsible leadership this morning. We can, I think, begin to expand or extend that a bit further. So we can look to the Financial Times, obviously one of the leading, if not the leading, international financial newspaper in the world. Once they start to get into discussions around responsible leadership, we can see that it's starting to get some traction. It's starting to be a concept that is entering into the mainstream business discourse. From this definition, we can see that if we take it to its logical extension, responsible leadership has a profoundly transformative impact in terms of how we think about leadership, how we think about the roles of leaders within organisations. It's not only about thinking about the role of shareholders or serving the interests of shareholders, it's thinking about the whole range of other stakeholders that organisations interact with or impact on, whether that's employees, clients, suppliers, the government, or in the case of the environment and so on, future generations. How do your decisions as leaders today impact or have potential impact on the future generations of not only Sri Lankan society, but the region and more globally? Developing that further, we can see another definition that argues for responsible leadership as being focused fundamentally around issues around transparency, ethical behaviour, respect for stakeholder groups, and again taking an expansive or extended definition of stakeholders as being beyond the shareholders to all individuals, all groups that companies interact with. Critically, there's a need for a commitment to economic, social and environmental value. So we can see a lot of movement in the economic space, organisations, companies looking to behave ethically, responsibly in terms of economic issues, in terms of financial management and so on. We can also see a lot of movement in the environmental space in terms of, say, reducing emissions, in terms of recycling programs, very everyday sorts of activities. The social space is also a critical one here. How do companies engage with their employees? How do companies engage with other members, with other parts of the supply chain? How are companies engaging with human rights issues? So again, a very expansive issue. And again, underpinning this drive and these discussions around responsible leadership is this broader question of a potential crisis of corporations, a potential crisis of leadership. Very profoundly putting to the forefront issues of legitimacy of leadership. Certainly in countries such as Australia, business over the last couple of decades, has been profoundly questioned in terms of what are the contributions it's making to society. How can it get beyond an often perceived view of companies being out to serve themselves and not being concerned about the broader society that they're part of? So again, that's part of the impetus for these discussions around responsible leadership. When we think about the potential impacts of responsible leadership, again, we can think of it working at a multidimensional level or across a range of different levels. When organisations and companies take seriously the question of responsible leadership, they're having impacts on the members of the company, the people who make up the organisation. They're having an impact on the team members, on the organisation at a macro level, and then beyond that at the societal level. And again, that's part of the space of the responsible leadership discussion, is thinking what are the boundaries between the company and the broader society? Where's the blurring occurring? How can we engage in terms of boundary management, relationships with other sorts of companies? So to drill down to a more specific level, why would companies engage in responsible leadership? What are the motives? What are the imperatives? Apart from those sort of broad issues which are critical, around being ethical organisations, around contributing to society, we can see through the evidence a range of very concrete positive outcomes for companies that are engaging proactively in this space, in this area. So we've got a number of examples listed there. Just very briefly want to touch on three just in passing. Firstly, consumers. We live in a society where consumers of all sorts are increasingly educated, increasingly discerning, increasingly not only wanting high quality, high value products, high value goods, but having a sense of this was produced in an ethical way. The fair trade movement, the fair trading process and so on, very much driven by consumer activism, by consumers saying we have certain expectations about the goods, about the products that we're purchasing, and we are going to make decisions about our purchasing based on our perception, our understanding of who we think is behaving well in this space, alternatively who perhaps is not behaving well in this space. So very strong connection with the role of consumers. Talent attraction, talent retention. When we think about how do we motivate employees, how are employees within organisations motivated? The classic method, going back to Fordist organisations, pay them more, pay them at different rates, pay them higher rates. Clearly salary, pay are critical in terms of motivation, but increasingly employees and organisations are looking for other incentives, other ways to be motivated. Part of that is a sense of I want to work with a company that I feel is making a positive good in the world that I'm part of. I'm interested obviously in a salary, in earning what I'm worth, but I also want to feel that what I'm doing is making a positive good to society. And I think we certainly see that as part of a generational change. The younger people who are entering the workforce today, going through higher education, are people who these are critical issues for them. So as leaders, as businesses, it's important that we engage, that we respond to them. And finally, in terms of these issues, the influence, the publicity, the promotional aspect, the reputation, the critical reputational dimensions of responsible leadership are also vital. Governments, organisations are monitoring business activity. There's a lot of kudos to be had from engaging and being seen to be very active in the responsible leadership space.